the first Australians whose lands, winds, and waters we all now share, and pay respect to their unique values and their continuing and enduring cultures that deepen and enrich the life of our nation and communities. We pay our respect to elders past and present, their ancestors, and their families who meet with us here today. So now just moving on to a quick bit of housekeeping. I would just like to let you know that the webinar presentation is being recorded today. So if you had some colleagues who were unable to make it, or even if you would just like to rewatch it at a later date, you will be able to do so. This will be done via an email in the same manner that we sent out the invitation. So please keep an eye out in your inbox for that to come through in the following weeks. Secondly, the resources that we will be discussing today are currently all live on the department website. However, for the webinar today, we will put these into the chat box, so you're more than welcome to follow along live using those links or use them to access the resources at a later date. I probably recommend using this time to bookmark them so that if you do need them at a later date, you can easily find them. Lastly, at the conclusion of the presentation, we will be holding a live question and answer session. So if you've got any questions that you would like to ask, that is the time to do so. We do ask that you hold off questions until that session. However, I do understand that through a webinar, you might get a burning question during the time. So if you do, please feel free to use the chat box function and we will discuss that at the conclusion. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our three speakers today. First up, we have Alana Judd from the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, who will introduce the Dairy Export Assurance Program and provide a brief overview of the program and how we've got to where we've got to today. Secondly, we have Shamal Kath from Dairy Australia, who will take you through the Welcome Pack and Dairy Export Registration Manual resources. Following Shamal, we will then have Clint Mossman, who I'm sure a few of you might know from industry, from the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, who will discuss the Export Facilitator service and outline how you will be able to get involved with that service from today. So I will now hand you over to Alana and she will start with some information on the DEEP project.
Thanks, Isabella, and thank you all so much for joining us today. Taking the step from domestic registration and into the export market can be challenging for companies and can become a lengthy process requiring large resource allocations. So companies wanting to take that next step can sometimes be wondering where to begin and how much work is involved in becoming export registered. This can sometimes lead people to feel like the process is too burdensome, which we have heard, especially for some in smaller companies. But sometimes the hardest part is just getting started. So the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestries has partnered with Dairy Australia to form the Dairy Export Assurance Program, which we lovingly call DEEP. Our program is dedicated to delivering a clear pathway for registration. We have developed a set of industry resources that will help domestic dairy companies understand what is involved in becoming export registered. In our webinar today, we would like to present 3 of our resource tools to equip you with the information and the expectations needed for the registration process. Since we started DEEP back in late 2020, a clear goal of ours has been to deliver tools to address the issues that we have heard from industry. We've conducted interviews, surveys, and sought active feedback as we've progressed to make sure that what we're creating is something that you want and that you actually need. So we have also done some discovery work to look at the current system for becoming export registered to understand if there are any knowledge gaps in regards to the expectations or the export requirements and how we can help address them. The DEEP project aims to ensure that the current regulatory framework, which is now over 20 years old, is reformed so that we can continue positioning the dairy export industry for success over the next 20 years and of course beyond. We want to ensure that Australian dairy remains a global leader in the future trading environment. In Australia, we're globally renowned for our best practice across almost all of our agricultural sectors, including our food safety systems. And this is so critical in our export market and our global reputation as a producer of our safe quality foods. So the information and insights gained throughout DEEP so far have informed the development of 3 resources to support you on your path to becoming export registered. I'm really, really happy to note that all of these are now publicly available and most importantly, they're free. So today we want to share with you our Welcome Pack, our Dairy Export Registration Manual and our Export Facilitator service. So if we start at the beginning of the process, once you have made the decision to begin the application process for export registration, or even if you're just curious about how the process works, if it's something that you would like to pursue, the first and the best place to start is our welcome pack. This has been designed to be a one-stop shop for export requirements. We have used a combination of carefully curated videos and physical resources to build the welcome pack, which has been designed to provide users with a comprehensive and well thought out process of where to begin and where to go next. So if I can introduce Shamal, he's going to take you through an overview of the welcome pack and the following step in the process, which is the Dairy Export Registration Manual. Thanks, Shamal.
Thank you, Alana, and good afternoon to everyone. As Alana mentioned, one of DEEP's main focuses was to identify the regulatory hurdles for domestic manufacturers to become export registered. As part of this, the team did a lot of work in trying to understand the differences between domestic and export legislation. Then we spoke to industry to get an understanding of their experiences with dealing with both of these systems. We developed two main reports summarizing our findings. And as part of our industry engagement, we conducted surveys using the department's online Have Your Say platform, as well as over the phone, as well as using Teams and some face-to-face interviews as well with the industry. We investigated two major demographics, first being establishments that were currently export registered, and the second, and probably the most importantly for our research, was establishments that considered export but did not complete the application process. The team really wanted to understand what were the challenges and hurdles faced by industry when attempting to gain export, so that we could develop specific resources and tools to assist. There's a good chance some of you here today were contacted as part of that research, and I thank you for your time. So two main pieces of evidence came out of that activity. Firstly, it was clear to us that industry was finding it hard to understand where to go to find relevant specific information regarding dairy export. And whilst the information was out there and they did eventually find it, it just took a lot of time to find the correct information. Even the information that was emailed by the department to industry was hard to digest as a new entrant. Second, there was a clear misunderstanding of the export requirements and how to ensure compliance.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you please reshare screen? I think someone is also sharing.
I think
It looks
Katrina,
like
you
Katrina
might
is
be
sharing your
accidentally.
screen. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Cool. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out where I was. So yeah, there was a clear misunderstanding of the export requirements and how to ensure compliance, especially at audit. So the team came up with a number of recommendations as part of these reports, and we further discussed and prioritize these outcomes to present some of the tools that we're presenting in today's webinar. These are the Welcome Pack, the Dairy Export Registration Manual, and the Export Facilitator Service. So starting with the Welcome Pack, what is it? So the Welcome Pack is an interactive resource designed to welcome potential dairy exporters on their journey. Ultimately, it is an upgraded version of the previous information pack that was sent out to potential exporters. Just for your reference, this is the current Welcome Pack, a snippet of the welcome page or the landing page of the Welcome Pack, which we'll go into later on. So why? The upgraded Welcome Pack is an innovative way to present information, improving the initial export experience, helping users to feel less overwhelmed in the initial introduction to dairy export. The Welcome Pack provides preliminary information in sections in an interactive, user-friendly manner, enhancing the application experience for prospective exporters. We really hope the Welcome Pack can be your one-stop shop to navigate the information you need in preparing yourself for export registration. Just for comparison, this is an example from the previous information pack that was emailed to potential exporters by the department. And you can see it is quite text heavy with a lot of attachments in there. So the Welcome Pack is live and is hosted in the department's website. you can use the search function of the department's webpage to actually find the welcome pack. And to be honest, that's probably the easiest way to go around it. That's exactly what I use as well. You will get a search result like at the bottom left there, and you can click on it to access a landing page. As Bella mentioned before, there will also be a link in the chat box today, and there should be a link in the email from this webinar invitation as well. So let's go into the welcome pack. I'm just going to open up my web browser, put that to the main screen. So this is the landing page of the welcome pack. As you can see, there's an introductory video, which I'm not going to play today, but it's basically there to welcome people into their journey as an exporter, and there's additional links here, which we will explore. So the first link is your dairy export journey. If I click on that, it will open onto your journey maps. So the reason why we've created journey maps is everyone's export journey is different. You might be a new entrant, never having exported before, or you could be an entrant that has done export in the past or is currently exporting, but is perhaps looking at exporting to a different region or a different product altogether. So there are a couple of videos in here that will help you guide you through that process, and additional resources as well to help you navigate that process. So I really encourage you to go in through these journey maps later on. The next link is your approved arrangement. Now this is a video, so I'm going to go to this other tab because we've preloaded that video to help with the buffering today. I will play this video now, and hopefully we won't have any issues with our internet.
To become export registered, the business will need to gain an approved arrangement. An approved arrangement is a documented food safety management system that the establishment will operate under. Its main function is to document how the business will continue to meet both Australian export legislation and the applicable importing countries' requirements when producing food fit for human consumption and eligible for export.
Thank you. So if you haven't exported before, the approved arrangement is probably a term that you haven't heard of before. And this video, at the aim of this video is to summarize that so you understand what it is. There's also some additional links in here, as well as a link to the checklist. So as part of your application process for export, you will need to complete this approved arrangement checklist, which you can think of it as an internal audit checklist. It'll guide you through the requirements and really help you in preparing for your export audit. The other link in here is importing country requirements. Again, different countries have different requirements that you need to abide by in order to get your product to that country. So the list of countries here as examples. There's also the Manual of Importing Country Requirements, or MICOR as we call it, and a link to MICOR in here. This is a good resource. It's a collection of information on specific requirements that has been collated, that is currently known to the department. So if you are looking at exporting to a certain region, definitely check out MICOR so you understand what the requirements are. There's also a little bit of information on the European Union because they do have specific requirements that are extra. Now, do I need export registration? Now, that is a good question. And based on legislation, there is such a thing as prescribed goods and non-prescribed goods. If you are looking at exporting a non-prescribed good, there is a good chance that you don't need export registration. And we found in our research that Industry Was did not understand this, and they were going through the process of looking at exporting a non-prescribed good and really wasting a lot of time in that process. So we put the definitions in here between prescribed and non-prescribed. We've also included a little video in here, but what we've also done additionally is for you guys to filter out whether your product is prescribed or not. There's a simple questionnaire in here where you can answer, a couple of questions to figure out whether your product is prescribed or not. So as you filter through, for example, destined to New Zealand, no. Is your product made in Australia for human consumption? You click yes. Is dairy the major component? Click yes, and so on and so forth. It will keep filtering down. Again, if you're still unclear after all that, please do get in contact with the department, and there are links throughout the website on how to contact the department. how to apply to become export registered is also another link within there, because the process is somewhat lengthy. So it's the step-by-step guide on how to get there. Additionally, we got forms and templates. Again, there's the approved arrangement checklist that I spoke to you about before. You can actually fill this checklist in here and submit it online as well. There's a European checklist because EU has different requirements, and some additional links as well. Resources for dairy exporters. So there's additional links in here that will really help you. The Dairy Australia, Are You Trade Ready, Michael, Austrade, the manual that we're going to talk about later on, and the guide, which is a previous link as well. Additionally, what we've done is we've collated some FAQs, and the FAQs are collated based on your export maturity or level of understanding. So initial questions, application process questions, audit-related questions, and after export registration questions. And we hope that through this collation, you can find the question and answer that you are seeking. If what you're looking for is not here, please do get in contact with the department through this link. So that's a good summary, I think, of the welcome pack, and I do encourage you all to have a look at the welcome pack later on. And now what I'll do is I'll go into the slide deck so I can talk to the next resource. So our next resource is the Dairy Export Registration Manual. So what is it? It is a guide to better understand the dairy export requirements and obtain export registration. This is an example of the landing page for the DERM, as we call it. Why? So we all know that legislation is not the easiest thing to read, and it can be tricky to understand. So the team wanted to create a tool that helped outline the requirements in an easily digestible format. We wanted to encourage dairy companies to consider export markets and enable market access faster at a reduced time and cost burden. How will we achieve this? So to become export registered, you must have documented procedures in place to demonstrate how you will meet your obligations. Each page of the DERM provides content in an engaging manner, using animations and videos aimed at educating the industry on dairy export and food safety. Most pages will also include a self-assessment module, which is also aimed at educating the user. In addition, we've also collated some additional resource links, which are external. An example of this is the FSANZ links, Codex Food Hygiene Book, the Australian Food and Grocery Council's Cold Chain Guidelines, MICO, which I mentioned before, DFSV technical notes, and other online training modules as well. The idea is that hopefully by using all these additional links, you will gain a holistic understanding of the food safety requirements stipulated for export. So today I will briefly showcase two elements of the manual. These are importing country requirements and product sampling and testing. For comparison, this is the information that is available for industry under these two topics in the current approved arrangement checklist. So now let's navigate to the DERM and look at what additional information is available. So just give me a second as I bring up the page. Excellent. So the manual, this is a landing page of the manual. As you can see, there's three main tabs: elements of an approved arrangement, online resources, and FAQ. It starts off with the introduction of DEEP and its projects with the introductory video. I'm not going to play it today for the sake of time. There's also a link to the export facilitator. So if you do have any additional questions, please do reach out. So if you click on the elements, there's 23 altogether in here. So as you can see, it starts off with some elements that are probably more common and related to domestic, and then it migrates into more export-related elements. So in the interest of time, I've preloaded the elements today because there are some videos that I want to play. So the key part about the each element is it's broken down into two sections. There's the export requirement, column of the export requirement, and an explanation tab. These accordions you can expand and minimize as you click on them. And each of them has a video each. So today I'll play the introductory video. Let's put it on full screen before we do.
Ensuring that importing country requirements are met is critical to the success of exporting your dairy products from Australia. Importing countries can require various standards to be met, such as microbiological, chemical, and processing aspects. Some requirements may need to be assessed before and during production. For example, the somatic cell count in milk. The department website database, MyCore, provides you with currently known importing country requirements. These requirements can relate to product testing, labelling, health certificate, and government seals on export containers or product. When planning to export dairy product for a particular market, you should check MyCore for your specific importing country requirements. You may also
In the interest of time, I'm just going to cut it short there, but you get the idea. There's also a link to the approved arranger checklist. And if you were to close that tab and expand it, under the explanation tab, you can see there's a lot more information in there, as well as some links embedded within the descriptions to help help industry understand the requirements. Usually there's an explanation video as well, which is slightly longer than the introductory video. So the next tab I'm going to go into is product sampling and testing. Again, similar format. We've got the export requirement, then we've got the explanation of the requirement. If you click read more, it expands out into more sections. Just going to highlight for this one, most of the elements will have this section called things you should consider when documenting your sampling or when you're documenting your procedure. And these are really dot points that we've incorporated that recommend that you include these into your internal audit program. And it's a way of asking the right questions so you can actually create a procedure that's meeting all the requirements. So I'm not going to play these videos today. What I am going to show on this element is there is a self-assessment module, and not all elements will have it, but most do have it. So if you click Start Assessment, this question will start to appear. So I'm going to play this question, which I've already played before, so it should buffer quite well. So here we go.
Lee is the laboratory technician at a dairy premises and is in charge of product sampling and testing this week. He's been fully trained to sample and test product for the local markets and has done so successfully in the past. Lee is aware that his manager has just updated site sampling and testing procedures to include the export requirements, but has not been briefed and trained on the new procedure. Upon inspecting the production schedule, Lee notices that there's an export product scheduled to be manufactured later this week. Whilst reading the product description, Lee notices that the export product pack size is similar to their current domestic product, but the overall palletizing format and labeling has changed. His company has not exported any products before, and Lee had not conducted sampling for export products in the past. As the responsible person for site sampling and testing this week, what action should Lee take to ensure export compliance with regards to the product sampling and testing requirements?
So the question is a little bit long, but the reason being is that we wanted to create a scenario question that was very acceptable and imitated what would happen in real life within the industry. And we're not expecting to shoot out, I guess, a score at the end of the modules. The purpose of the questions is really to provide feedback and educate the industry or the participants. So if you click any of these answers and click submit, you'll get some feedback submitted as to why your answer was correct or incorrect. And it's really about educating the user. So looks like we've got there's a little bit more time, so I'm going to showcase one last element, which is transfers and declaration of compliance. What I'm going to say about this element is this is a bit of a wordy element. There's a lot involved with this element because this is talking about some of the documentation that's required in the export process. This is a good example of how we've taken an element that has a lot of text, which is quite text heavy and hard to understand, and incorporated a animation to help industry understand the process. So I'm not going to play the full video, but I'll play a little bit so you get an understanding of how we went about it.
In the dairy export industry, export-eligible dairy goods are often moved from one export site to another during the supply chain process. For example, you may transfer your export product from your processing site to a dairy export storage site. When this occurs, a transfer document is required for every export-eligible dairy product. Each dispatching site and each receiving site is responsible for ensuring the transfer documents for products dispatched and received are accurate. In addition to your transfer document, before your dairy product can be exported from Australia, an export permit is required to be issued by a department authorised officer or a company approved by the department who is an export permit issuer. The exporter, which may not be the dairy manufacturer but a separate exporting company, is required to be in possession of a declaration of compliance before they can apply for an export permit. The declaration must be issued by a representative of the dairy manufacturing site who has the knowledge and experience to determine that the dairy product is fit for human consumption, export eligible, and meets the importing country requirements. Such personnel responsible for issuing product declaration of compliance must be mentioned in the approved arrangement. You need to develop...
So again, it's a good way of summarising the different documents that are required for export and the relationship between them. So with that, what I'm going to finally show is the online resources page. So these are the additional links that I mentioned before that you can go into, which will be really helpful to get a holistic understanding of food safety. We've also got a link to the FAQ page from the welcome pack. And there's also a short feedback survey in here as well that you can do, which is I think about 5 questions. So appreciate any feedback that you do give us on these resources. So going back to my slide deck, so the export registration manual is live, so you can visit it through dairyexport.au. There is also a link in the invite and as well as in the chat today. So some of these elements found in the DERM are applicable to both domestic and export and can assist you in strengthening your understanding of food safety. And as you saw, the videos and the scenario questions are a great tool to educate staff on good food safety practices in an engaging manner. So to wrap up, I encourage you all to explore this resource, even if you're not considering export, to utilize the resource to gain the outcomes your company desires. So on that note, I want to thank everyone for your time and attention today, and remind that we're happy to answer any questions you may have on either of the resources at the end of the webinar, and please feel free to pop them in the chat as well. With that being said, I will now hand over to Clint, who is one of our export facilitators in the department, to talk to you about how the department's export facilitator role can help you on your export journey. Thank you, Clint.
Thank you, Shamal. Very insightful indeed. The 2 functional resources explained by Shamal that have been developed are designed to help you along your export journey and provide you with details on information and resources that can use for your export application and registration process. The final resource that we have that the DEEP program has implemented, I'd like to introduce to you is the Export Facilitation Service. But before I get into what the service means and what's it about, I just want to highlight that becoming export registered does involve a series of steps, and it is really important that you understand your ongoing role, your responsibilities and obligations once you become export registered as a dairy manufacturer. The registration process involves completing forms, having that approved arrangement in place, but also as part of the process, you'll be subject to departmental audits, which includes an on-site component where the departmental auditors will undertake an assessment of your system to see that you are export ready in regards to manufacturing your dairy products. So the purpose of the Export Facilitation Service and the resources that have been developed are really designed to assist you and understanding the expectations and making sure that you're prepared for that export approval process for you to be audit ready before the department comes out and undertakes that audit to assess you. A team of export facilitators are available to ensure there is a two-way communication process, which is available to you looking at becoming export registered, as well as those who are already registered, but they could be looking at exploring some new export opportunities. So some of those markets that you might have seen on the screen earlier from Shamal, it's an opportunity to use the service for that purpose as well. We have a great deal of information on the department website and contained in the welcome pack and in the DERN, but we appreciate and understand that sometimes it can be very overwhelming, and every manufacturer has their own uniqueness to it all. Where you're located, the type of processes that you have in place, the product that you manufacture, and indeed the type of markets that you might be looking at exporting to or servicing in the future. We appreciate that sometimes it's nice to have an actual person who can provide a personalised assistance, and that is essentially what the export facilitation service offers. Our aim is for you to understand what the expectations and obligations of the export registration process can be. And I really highlight that. It's really important that if you don't understand what you need to do, then how can you do it? So we don't want to be in a position where you are now ready for the audit, and unfortunately you're just not ready to convey what you do to the auditor. So understanding why you have to do this and understanding the process will strengthen your chances of becoming registered quicker, which can only be a good thing for everybody. It's been mentioned before, but I'll say it again because it's a good thing to say when the service is free. It doesn't cost you anything, the export facilitation service. So I encourage any company that thinks that they may want to become export registered to first and foremost make contact with one of the facilitators and share with us what help you require, what you believe you may need assistance in. If we find at any stage through the process that you need something or you don't understand what the requirement is, no problem. Let's set up a phone conversation or Teams meeting with the key people in the business, and we can work our way through that. So I'd encourage it to just not necessarily be a one-person exercise. You may want to have a Teams meeting. You can invite your senior managers into that so they have an understanding on what you might be doing as the QA manager, or whatever the case might be, for this export process. Now, if you decide to take up the offer of working with an export facilitator, some of the things that we do to assist you on that screen there is, as I mentioned, we will take you through the export registration application process. So we will advise you of the type of steps and the timing that may be involved that is relevant to your situation. We'll point you in the right direction of valuable information resources that are available for you. So if you're starting to get a bit confused or lost in the information that Shamal supplied, or you need to understand something a bit more deeper in one of those things, this is the perfect opportunity to have a chat in regards to that. We also introduced to you the approved arrangement, or the AA checklist, which is a document that contains prompts that will assist you in assessing your own food safety systems and helps you to ensure that you have sufficient detail of the controls and procedures in your documented food safety system, so it can meet the requirements of meeting compliance for export legislation. Shamal showed you an example earlier of a page document which had product testing and importing countries. Those extracts are from the approved arrangement checklist, and the approved arrangement checklist also has some references to legislation. So we encourage you to fill that in and send that back to the export facilitator so they can review the document and provide some feedback to you. It's a great opportunity for you to do a bit of a health check on your current food safety system that you have in place and see if it will align or where the gaps could be where you might need to add more detail to it so you can be in a position to meet the export requirements. It's a really important document, and I would encourage you to take that opportunity to do so. We may also request some other documentation from you, such as the HACCP audit table with your CCPs, your internal audit schedule, and maybe even some photographs showing the condition of your premise. It all helps us build an understanding of who you are and what you want to do, so we can help tailor the answers to all needs. The completed AA checklist and additional documents you provide will help the facilitator make an assessment in regards to how ready you are for that next step, that departmental audit. When the facilitator believes you are ready, we will hand you over to the dairy audit team, and an on-site audit will then be scheduled where you will then need to demonstrate that you are effectively managing the process that you have documented. It's important to note that the information I've supplied here or talked about, the AA checklist and any additional documents, it's not a technical assessment by the export facilitator, and nor can the facilitator service provide a consultancy advice in regards to the upcoming export audit. It's about sharing information and understanding expectations in the registration process, so you can put your best foot forward when that audit comes. Having us review the information, we'll provide that feedback and we'll give you the opportunity to address any concerns or issues prior to that audit. Because when it comes time for the audit team to go on site and assess all systems, they are doing that. They are the ones who will be doing the technical assessment of all system, and that activity by the department is chargeable. So in the pre-audit stage of the facilitator, costs you nothing. Once you start engaging in the audit process is a chargeable activity. And if you have any findings that you need to address from that initial audit, you'll need to follow that up with the audit team, which is also a chargeable activity. So we want you to have a clear understanding and expectation before you get on that journey, so you can, well, hopefully cost less money for you. If at any time in the process you have questions that could be technical in nature, so it's jumping back a bit to the export facilitator side of things. So if there's something that could be technical that you may just want more clarity on before you get to that audit process and you're still with the export facilitator, no problem, no worries, we can help you. We will have technical members of the team that we can bring in and answer that question that you may have. Once you are export approved, this does not automatically mean that you have access to all importing countries. You have it for most countries, but some countries require specific requirements by their government authorities that will require you to do additional information before we can get access into that country for your manufacturing site. This may include a listing that the relevant overseas government authority requires. So at the Export Facilitation Service, we can help have a chat about that and navigate what the requirements are for those countries are, so you can make a decision on whether those markets are viable for you or not, or at least you understand the expectations of what you may need to do before you progress too far down the track. So this next slide, I'd just like to share with you, we had some positive feedback from a business owner who became export registered with the department on the 29th of July. And I'll just read this out, but they basically say, I'd like to acknowledge this initiative. I think it is an excellent step in helping our Australian businesses, such as mine, to create new markets and new jobs. Our legislation and regulations can be a minefield, and it is difficult for small businesses like me to manage this, especially when you don't know they exist. I think that's a very true and accurate summary. Including the export registration application process for new entries can be scary, can be daunting. We know that. We get that. We understand that it's not easy. And our experience is that it can take up to a year for a company, maybe even more, to be approved for the export process. With the introduction of the export service, facilitation service, we have found that when a company is committed, and that's really important, if you can throw commitment and resources to the export process and use those resources that we have made available on our department's websites, many companies have been able to reduce that approval time down to approximately 3, 4, 5 months. I'll just pause there for a second. 3 to 4 months compared to a year. Imagine the export opportunities that you might be able to have if you can reduce time to become registered, but still meeting compliance. 6, 7, 8 months could be incredible, but you need to make sure that you understand and commit to the process so you can put your best foot forward, but encouraging. So we really do encourage you to use the service, and that's the conclusion from me, and I'll pass back to Bella. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Clint, and thank you to all of our speakers today. So I will now open up the floor for our live question and answer session. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to start asking now. Any questions? Okay, so we have actually just had one come through in our chat box from Carl. So it's about the export facilitator. So Clint, this might be one for you. So how will the export facilitator service potentially complement and align with other export facilitation services provided by Austrade and the state government agencies? It's a great question, Carl.
Great one, and happy for others to jump in after me too, after I give that initial service, Carl. So certainly, I suppose we're really into the weeds here as such. So this export facilitation is very much targeted in regards to a company becoming export registered to manufacture dairy products that can then be exported. So there's a whole heap of legislative requirements that a manufacturing site that we call a registered establishment, once they become approved, that needs to comply with, so you can maintain and make products. It's all around maintaining market access. When it comes to state development and Austrade, absolutely very key components of the world, and they can certainly provide a lot of guidance for exporters and manufacturers in general terms. I suppose it's an extension in many ways, that if it's something that you really are seeking out and looking at doing, then the department is another important jigsaw part, where if you don't get the approvals from the department, you can't really progress any further. So a lot of information, Austrade, etc., will provide you more than just the requirements for what an export manufacturing site needs to do. They will talk to you trends and potential markets, but the difference for this service is really that we're getting down to the dairy manufacturing site being able to manufacture the products so they are bulletproof, if that's the right way, for when any overseas countries come knocking. It's all around certification for us, so that's what this facilitation service is more targeted around. Hope that helps answer it. Happy for others to jump in if need be.
Great. Thanks, Clint. We do have a few more coming through. So we do have one in from Emiliano. So she just wanted to thank us for the great templates. But Shamal, this is probably one for you. Was there ever a consideration to provide an AA template similar to what DFSV or New South Wales Food Authority do with their FSP templates?
So there is a AA checklist if that's what you're asking. So that's more of a internal document that you can use as your I guess internal audit as part of your internal audit program in preparation for the export audit. And that is a link that's within the DEM and the welcome pack as well.
Do you want me to jump in?
Yes, please, Shane. Yeah.
Yeah, so in regards to, if I get the question right, so in terms of aligning what's happening with the states in terms of their own checklist and own requirements and what we require from an export point of view. So there's a whole lot of work happening with the states to see if we can get one consistent approach in relation to audit and all those audit elements and using a common checklist across the board. So going forward, we think that there's a real opportunity for us to streamline that process and get a little bit more consistency across the types of checklists and how we interpret those checklists across the board, including Dairy Food Safety Victoria and New South Wales.
Awesome. So I've got another one come through from Rob. So as an exporter but not a manufacturer of dairy products, what compliance issues should we be aware of? It's probably another good one for you, Shane.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in with that one as well. So that probably from an exporter point of view is making sure that whatever product it is that you're exporting and whatever market it is that you're exporting to, that you've got information from the manufacturer around, export eligibility. So those declarations of compliance that were mentioned earlier, making sure that those companies have got appropriate listing for a particular market if that is applicable for the market that you're sending your product to. And probably as an exporter, your biggest responsibility is making sure that you've got all the appropriate documentation in place prior to the goods being exported, so that you've got your export permit and you've got your health certificate in place to be able to export your goods from the country, as well as having all of that evidence and information from the manufacturer to make sure that the product is actually eligible for export to the particular market that you're going to. So they're probably the key things from an exporter point of view. And, making sure that you've got that close relationship with the manufacturer in terms of eligibility, but equally making sure that you've got that relationships with your importer as well. So we have our export requirements and the certification that sits around that. But you need to be making sure that, that you're meeting any import conditions, import permit conditions that might sit over and above the government-to-government certification that we issue.
So we've just had another one come through from Lorenas. This is one for you, Clint, about the export facilitator. So would you have the same export facilitator once you make an inquiry, or will you be dealing with multiple people? And just the second half of that question as well, it's mentioned that the export facilitator is a free service, but will you be charged if you require more assistance, like the multiple teams calls, etc., that you mentioned?
Thank you, Bella. In regards to the first question, we try to ensure that you just have a one consistent person that's dealing with you for that continuity. So if you are approaching the export facilitator, you'll basically have the same person who's dealing with law discussions around that. The second point is, if you need multiple meetings and or chats when you're using the export facilitation service, no problem. You don't get charged for that. The charging will begin when you actually apply to become export registered for a paper form that we use called an X26, and when the dairy technical team starts auditing the establishment, that's when the charges start coming in. So if you need to use that export facilitation service for 1 week or for 2 months or for one time only or 7 times, no problem. It's not a chargeable service that we're providing there from the export facilitation side of things.
Great, thank you. So we have had one come through from Jacqueline. So for non-prescribed dairy goods, can you please explain in relation to AA registration?
Sure, not a problem. Thanks, Jacqueline. So some countries require products that Shamal mentioned was non-prescribed. Some countries require health certification. So where that is required, they kind of become prescribed in some capacity, if that makes the term right. So if you require a health certificate, and an example is if you're exporting ice cream to South Korea or Malaysia, traditionally they are not, they classified as non-prescribed goods, but because health certificates are required to get the ice cream into those countries, that requires the manufacturer to be export registered, and as a result would have to have an approved arrangement in place. So they would come into line just like any other dairy manufacturer that would be seeking for export registration.
Excellent. They've probably only really got time for about one more, which is lucky, and Clint, this will be another one of you. So if we are an export registered facility, but looking for more countries to export to, what process is involved to register for those countries, or do we just have to follow import requirements through MyCore?
MyCore is a good starting point, a good platform for you. So if you're looking at potentially growing your business into different markets, I'd encourage you to look at MyCore. And if you have any, if you need any clarity from MyCore or some assistance, that's where we can then have those discussions. So MyCore won't tell you every single little answer. Sometimes you'll have to go into some of the links there and navigate through websites. So once again, the export facilitation service is there where if you're looking at going to a certain market and if it requires a listing, more than happy to have that chat before you actually start submitting an application for that. So the conditions can vary significantly, so more than receptive to have those conversations if need be before you start applying to us.
Excellent. So look, I just wanted to thank everyone for all of your questions. I hope that we answered them as you wanted them answered, but look, if not, please feel free to use that export facilitator service, and I did pop that email into the chat box. You can always send us an email following this webinar presentation. So this now brings us to the end of the presentation today, but I just wanted to let you know before you go that the Dairy Export Assurance Program is still working hard across multiple areas of the dairy export sector, and we do have other projects in the pipeline. So we're hoping to present these over the next few months, so please keep an eye out for further webinar invitations in your inbox, and we would obviously love for you to attend. As this is our first webinar presentation as a team, we would love to receive some feedback from you all. So I have just quickly posted that into the chat box now. So we would really appreciate any feedback that you may have for today, and this will obviously help improve the experience for next time. So just to close, I would like to thank you all again for taking the time to join us today. It has been so great to see you all here. And to be completely honest, we have been overwhelmed by the response we have received. And I think it's fantastic that as an industry, we can get together and have a really good discussion around the resources that are going to help all of us going forward. So on behalf of the Dairy Export Assurance Program team, we hope you have found today insightful and will enjoy using these resources. I know that we are super excited, especially for the Export Facilitator service, so that we can be on that journey with you right from the beginning to the end. So hopefully we will hear from many of you very shortly. But look, for the time being, have a great afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for your time.